One word.
One word.
We wrote Carly as a hero. She is a hero that goes bad.
I wish we had gotten to see more of Karli Morgenthau and the Flag Smashers in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think there was something unique to Karli that we hadn't seen before with other antagonists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. At a glance, Karli may seem like Killmonger in that they both had valid criticisms of the world, but I think where they went wrong was very different.
I agree with your fight. I just can't get with the way you're fighting it.
And I think the Flag Smashers, having managed to get support from millions across the world, raises very different questions, like how should our democracies handle crises? How democratic are we really? So in this video, I want to explore these questions, which I also think help explain Karli and where I think she went wrong. Because I don't think it was as simple as this.
There were still people in there.
This is the only language these people understand.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier touches on a lot of important topics. It wasn't perfect by any means, but I enjoyed it, and I'm glad for many of the conversations it has sparked, like the legacy of and ongoing racism in the United States, the pain that has done and still causes to this day, or how our military intervenes across the world, or what the military turns people into, and of course, raising questions about how we treat people in general, especially those in greater need. In the MCU, half of the world's population died in an instant. We learned that during the next 5 years, countries opened up their borders, needing help after losing so many people. When the heroes went back in time and caused everyone who had died to come back, millions of people who had found new homes during this time were displaced. They were kicked out from places they had helped rebuild. This is where the Flag Smashers come in.
Yeah, essentially, these people, they want a world that's unified without borders. So you can see why a lot of people are into that.
They've been gathering support through providing supplies like medicine and food to people displaced, which the Flag Smashers have had to take, much like Robin Hood. Only instead of Robin, we have Karli. Karli and 7 others who were among the people displaced have taken the super serum, giving them abilities like Steve Rogers, formerly Captain America. Even though the Flag Smashers fought to get supplies and medicine to people, many people were still suffering and dying in resettlement camps set up by a government agency known as the GRC, including Danya Madani, who was like a mother to Karli. It's after this loss, Karli escalates the situation by bombing a building with government people still inside. I'm not going to get into the ethics of the violence in this video, other than noting that the GRC was also doing violence to people through enforcement of borders and denying needed supplies which millions were suffering from, including people dying like Danya Madani. If you're interested in that discussion, I recommend checking out the video I did on Pixar's Smash and Grab. And while you're at it, why not subscribe and click the bell so you know when new videos come out. It really helps the channel. You can also support us on Patreon. We have recently updated the goals and rewards, so you get things like early access to future videos, and your support would allow us to dedicate more time to videos. I'd love for us to be able to get videos out more frequently. It just can be difficult between working a full-time job and raising a family to get to as much as I'd like. I know many are struggling though, so please only pitch in if you can afford to. Liking and sharing is still a huge help.
And the dust cleared, and the screaming stopped. It took me 2 days until I found dead bodies. And the Avengers? They went home.
Many times in the MCU, we have seen antagonists motivated by wrongs done to them. Zemo, who we get to see again in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, wanted to destroy the Avengers after he lost his family during the destruction that took place in Sokovia from the battle with Ultron. The Flag Smashers are the first time we are seeing a large group of people take collective action to change things in response. Karli and her friends are able to be so effective because of this large group of support from around the world. It's not just people protesting in support of the Flag Smashers, they are active participants. While I am not saying I agree with all of the Flag Smashers' actions, it was inspiring to see a piece of popular media portray a group of average people with far fewer resources rival governments, especially through the use of technology to organize everyone across the world. In the real world, the intricacies of how this would work would be a lot more complicated, obviously, and it would be far more likely to struggle to keep cohesion. Governments would actively try to infiltrate and stop a group organizing, which we've seen throughout history.
It's a great app.
Especially given how seemingly easy it was for Bucky to do so. I think it would actually be pretty interesting to see a show more focused on the Flag Smashers and security like this. Maybe a show about intrigue. Marvel seemed to be experimenting more with the TV show format, and I just think that would be really different. But the point I want to focus on is, we don't really see how the Flag Smashers phone app works or how the people involved act as a group. We just know there's a lot of supporters that provide assistance and information, as well as occasionally receiving commands. We do get to see Karli interact with her friends though, which I think raises some interesting questions about democracy and organizing, because clearly Karli's peers have disagreed with a number of decisions she has made along the way.
After condemning this latest action by the radical group known as the Flag Smashers, the GRC formally began drafting legislation known as the Patch Act, which would seek to restore traditional border regulations and fast-track the return to normalcy.
While there are many forms of democracy, at its core, democracy is supposed to give power to the people. Most of us are familiar with representative democracy, where we get to vote occasionally on who will represent us in our government, whether at a local or larger level. Then we must trust that our representatives will have our best interests in mind when taking action. Unfortunately, this often isn't the case. Widely popular policies may get ignored, and it can be difficult to hold politicians accountable, as they can play to optics and use money to sway public opinion, not to mention other tactics like gerrymandering. Even when politicians can be voted out, there may be years before another election is held. And what about people like refugees? Do they even get representation?
The Global Repatriation Council, we are here to help you find your way.
In Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the GRC is an international council with representatives from several countries that claim to be established to provide resources and assistance to those displaced. They are more concerned about how they appear to the public than actually helping them.
Do you think it is fair for governments to have to support them?
Yes.
And we see this mirrored in the real world. More money will often be spent on advertising that help is being done than actually helping people. Even when the GRC go to vote on what to do, we see them brazenly question why they even need to vote.
Do we really need to bother with a vote?
It's silly to them because why should people they don't represent concern them? They can't be held accountable. And while that line may seem too on the nose, how often do we see votes where the outcome is known before votes are even held? We see votes on party lines or votes for moneyed interests that often go against popular opinion. The GRC not only haven't tried to represent those displaced, but have treated them like garbage. With this in mind, it's not surprising that Karli would have so much support, even if she made decisions that people don't always agree with, because at least she's fighting for them. In a way, Karli is a representative of the people displaced around the world, although there are some key differences, in that Karli obviously wasn't voted in, and another interesting difference is that people themselves are actively participating in helping the Flag Smashers. They're not forced to join the app or help out in any way that we are shown. It seems people are helping willingly. This in itself is some form of democracy. The people themselves are being empowered and given some direct agency. It doesn't seem there is any voting or consensus when it comes to decision making though. I think this is an important thing to keep in mind, especially since the show even makes a point to say that the people affected should be involved in decisions.
But the question is, who's in the room with you when you're making those decisions?
This is where I think Karli went wrong. She seems to be calling all the shots. Karli, unlike most villains we have seen, doesn't want to keep any power for herself.
Because you wanted to control a world that hurt you, but I wanted to change it. I'm not interested in power or an empire.
She genuinely wants to change the world to empower people, but doesn't seem aware of the danger and the way she makes decisions may undermine that goal. For starters, while people are not forced to help the Flag Smashers, that doesn't mean those who choose not to participate couldn't be affected by the Flag Smashers' decisions. Governments could pull the little aid they were giving or use military force in retribution. Now, I would place most responsibility for that on the governments in that scenario, but the point is, there is still an impact on those who did not get a say.
One world.
When Karli's friends disagree with her, she gets frustrated, almost acting as if the others no longer believe in their vision or that they can succeed. Yet, we have already seen the others are willing to die for this cause. So it seems clear Karli's peers are only unsure about her specific decisions. They hesitate, but ultimately go along with Karli because what is the alternative? They choose what they believe is the lesser of two evils. Wait, that sounds familiar. So, okay, both the GRC and Carly got it wrong, and maybe we will never have a perfect democracy, but are there improvements that can be made that don't just rely on those in power doing the right thing?
You've got to do better, Senator.
And what about other aspects of our lives? How democratic are our workplaces, schools, or homes? And what might that look like?
No se puede meter así nomás.
The Zapatistas cannot interfere in community life at its own discretion. Here, the people rule, while the government merely obeys.
Por eso nosotros como Zapatistas.
That is why we, Zapatistas, do not fight for power, neither at elections nor with arms.
Ni por las armas, sino que estamos.
We exist because the people have decided to live without politicians.
Sin partidos políticos que los engañen.
Who only lie and disrespect, and we are protecting our own people.
The Zapatistas are a political and military decentralized organization led by the indigenous people of Chiapas, Mexico. They control a large region of territory where they have autonomous municipalities that came about when the Zapatistas demanded work, land, housing, food, healthcare, education, independence, freedom, democracy, justice, and peace for their communities. I'm just going to focus on a fraction of their ideas and how their democracy operates. Sometimes it can be hard to imagine how things could be different without looking at real-life examples, and they have continued to exist autonomously for nearly 3 decades now. If you would be interested in a more in-depth video about them, please let me know in the comments. The Flag Smashers' use of masks is what reminded me of the Zapatistas. Masks are often used to hide identities, especially in superhero stories. And of course, practically speaking, the Flag Smasher mask did help hide individual identities among a group, but it also seemed like an act of solidarity to me, worn to show support for their shared struggle, that they were in this together. And it certainly didn't seem like Carly was worried about her face being seen. She puts the mask on to fight, making the mask feel more like a war cry. The Zapatistas similarly are known for wearing masks whenever filmed or interacting with outsiders. They hide their faces to be seen.
Below in the cities, we did not exist. Our lives were worth less than those of machines or animals. We were like stones, like weeds in the road. We were silenced. We were faceless.
It's unsurprising that in response to feeling silenced, the Zapatistas reject traditional representative politics and choose to value direct democracy and equality. A pillar of their political philosophy is mandar obedeciendo, which means to lead by obeying. So while we have representatives who are elevated and given power, the Zapatistas would instead hold local assemblies to make decisions. These assemblies allow anyone above the age of 12 to participate in the decision-making. Consensus where all agree is always the goal, but they will fall back to a majority vote when needed. From the local level, representatives can be sent to municipalities to pass on what their local community has decided. If need be, they will need to travel back and forth between their village to make sure what is decided is agreeable to their village. Then, from the municipalities, there is a third level of government called zones, which works in the same fashion as local to municipal. With this form of participatory democracy, it would be much less likely that any of the around 360,000 people living there to not feel heard. Anyone is able to raise issues at assemblies and can be directly involved in discussions before decisions are made. This takes advantage of diversity to make sure lenses beyond the majority are applied when considering solutions and problems, and is probably one of the reasons the region has a much lower rate of hunger and violence compared to other Mexican communities. I'm sure it also helps that there is common ownership of the land and that education and healthcare are free. Not bad for a largely self-reliant economy. But of course, for the Zapatistas, democracy is a way of life, not just something that happens in government. Even places of work and schools are also run democratically, which unfortunately is quite different from what most of us get to experience.
How many times do we have to pay with our lives just to be citizens of this goddamn planet?
I think Falcon and the Winter Soldier does a good job of reminding us how poor conditions can be for many people, and that our governments often allow people to go unheard and without help. Not just in a time of crisis, although crises definitely highlight the extremes. And this raises questions about what should people stuck in those conditions do? People won't just roll over and take it forever, nor should they. The indigenous population of Chiapas, Mexico endured a history of terrible treatment. 500 years of struggle led to the Zapatistas standing up and saying, "Enough is enough. and essentially declared war on Mexico on the day of the NAFTA trade agreement, January 1st, 1994. They took over and destroyed some government buildings because they felt all other avenues had been tried. There were a lot of people killed in that initial battle. Since then, the Zapatistas have been peaceful. They are armed, but only to protect themselves. Unfortunately, governments often vilify those demanding to be treated better. Both the military of Mexico and paramilitary groups have killed and attacked the indigenous people of Chiapas over these decades. We see a parallel with the GRC and refugees. The flag smashers form in response and fight back. The GRC then uses this as an excuse to harm people further.
Do you know who I am?
Even boasting about the ability to just use the military to force people out.
There are troops in place. I can make a call and have the refugees move now.
I was glad the show called their vilification of the flag smashers out and showed there was a responsibility to do better.
You have to stop calling them terrorists.
Unfortunately, this does not parallel the real world. Politicians do not so easily do the right thing, which is why I think it is important to examine how our democracy functions, but also ask, what can we do? The Zapatistas present a possibility that may seem unrealistic, yet they exist and have continued to do so for nearly 3 decades now. I'm not saying we should change things and just be like the Zapatistas. They wouldn't recommend that either. As they have said, Zapatism cannot be exported. Every locality must fight their struggle. I do think that things could be more democratic though, and that we could have a system that treats people better. And when I speak of democracy, I mean more than what we typically think of. I mean in our everyday lives. Our friendships, families, workplaces, homes, and more. Democracy is that important. And that's why I think this was Carly's mistake. Focused on the wrongs committed against people, she seemed to lose sight of an important aspect of the communities the flag smashers were helping, their voices. Things may have gone quite differently had she listened to her peers or involved them or the other millions of people in the decision making. Of course, people wouldn't have been in this situation in the first place if the GRC or other governments had given the people a voice. I don't think it's a coincidence that the mascot of America and the GRC faced this on a personal level. His failure to listen led to the death of his friend. We don't need to wait for those in power to do better or to give us permission. We can build spaces now that foster democracy. What that looks like will be unique to each community. Maybe you're a parent and you want your child to grow up experiencing more agency. You could connect with other parents to form a network to support each other in doing so, which could also mean helping each other with childcare. It's a huge help to talk to others who share your values and goals and the struggles that come with that. Not to mention, there are many who would have those same goals if they were not so busy struggling to have their needs met elsewhere. So having a network for childcare could really help those who cannot afford it. If that doesn't sound interesting to you, then perhaps there are families struggling to find food in your area. So you could get people together to make a community fridge. Or maybe it's hard to get around. Well, even online, we can make spaces that try to create or make things together. Spaces to form real bonds and support. The point is, there are a lot of ways to build communities. Or as Subcommander Marcos of the Zapatistas would say, it is not necessary to conquer the world. It is sufficient to make it new. Us. Today. I would love to see Marvel explore the Flag Smashers more in the future with this in mind. Maybe the remaining movement learns from what has happened and creates their own autonomous spaces. I don't know, what do you think about that? Let me know in the comments. If we are to build these spaces, it will require some vulnerability and openness. What we are willing or capable of doing will vary though. It can be scary to be vulnerable, but when we are able to be open about our struggles, we can find others who relate and come together to do something about it. Much like the Zapatistas, we can wear our masks not to hide, but to invite anyone to join the struggle. The Flag Smashers' rallying call was one world, one people, to signify that we should all be in this together. The Zapatistas also say it's a world with many worlds in it, reminding us that while we support each other in our struggles, our solutions will be unique in some way to our communities because our diversity is a strength. At least it can be when everyone is being heard. Or as a silly video essayist may say, it's important for everyone to hear and know you're not alone.
But the struggle is what brings us all together. People who have nothing in common. For we are, after all, simply one world and one people.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to see more like this, please use your power to vote by hitting subscribe or maybe leaving a like or even a dislike if you hated it. If you like comics and are looking for a healthier, progressive space to enjoy them, I want to recommend Anomic Comics. It's a new channel made by my friend Dane, who collaborated with me on my Miles video, as well as a Spider-Man video on his other channel, Forced Adversity. So I think you all might like it. And I just want to remind everyone, you can support us on Patreon. You can get things like early access to future videos for just $2, and then higher tiers, I will add your name to the credits like this, or even give a shout out. I want to be honest that I feel uncomfortable asking, but I'd really love for us to be able to get videos out more frequently. Your support could make that possible. I know many are struggling though, so please only pitch in if you can afford to. Liking and sharing is a huge help as well. Take care, everyone, and remember, you're not alone.
Que para rebelarse y luchar no son necesarios ni líderes, ni caudillos, ni mesías, ni salvadores. Para luchar solo se necesita un poco de vergüenza, un tanto de dignidad y mucha organización.